Sonic, the heart of your system.
The Cougar Conquer 2 is a gorgeous full-size tower chassis mixed with quality materials for a wait, what? Sorry, but I am not one of those guys and I will not be sugarcoating my review on the Cougar Conquer 2. Showcased at Computex last year was really the first time I heard about there being a second Conquer. I think this was for the best, as not hearing about it prior meant I had no high expectations building up, and just as well. For me, and starting with the outside of the case, there is just way too much going on. Even the original Conquer was a bit much for some, but I think that style quickly grew on people, which then turned into a case many loved. I myself did 4 builds in the original. The Conquer 2 is big, bulky, internally cramped, and expensive. And what's going on with that single front fan pushed right up against that glass panel? At least I can remove that and put a screen behind it. Just on the outside alone, we find a mix of steel, plastic, yes, that is not anodized aluminum, fake carbon fiber, RGB, and by the way, the front Cougar logo is a static orange LED only, and one piece of actual aluminum can be found on each side. Now remember, the original Conquer was all aluminum, which was one of its standout features. Another standout of the original was that wide open side area to show off all your glorious hardware. As you can see in the Conqueror 2, I'm not sure what's going on, as I really can't see any of my expensive hardware inside. One of the main selling points for the new case is it has a removable case. You might be thinking, what? You mean a removable motherboard tray? But no, what you actually see on the outside is a big fat shell-like body like you see in the Fast and Furious movies on the cars that have those ridiculous body kits. This really serves no purpose here and increases the overall case size to a whopping 630 high, 360 wide, and over 800 deep. So getting back to that removable case, the actual case slides out on this little rail system which you pull on via a plastic handle. But before that, there are over 10 screws and latches that need to be removed first before sliding this thing out. With the actual case out of the oversized shell, this is where all your hardware attaches to. This chassis comes in at 500 high, 200 wide, and 660 deep. Not so big now, are you? And the quality of this chassis is quite poor, with a phenomenal amount of rivets used and some of the worst flexing I've seen in a case to date. And just for lols, I managed to just about fit the original Conquer inside the external chassis of the Conquer 2. Motherboard support is up to CEV, but even with an eATX board fitted, you can see just how much room is taken up. I will give it to Cougar for cable cutouts, as plenty can be found along the motherboard edge side, 2 up the top, 1 in the PSU shroud, 1 along the very bottom, and some at the very front, but no cable grommets can be found. There is a vertical GPU mount, which I thought at first was very flimsy, but thankfully once you install your power supply, a rubber pad underneath the vertical bracket rests on your PSU, which helps any sag. Just to the right of this is a very large cover, which is made from plastic and is held in via 1 screw at the front. You would think removing this would allow for 360 radiator to be mounted at the front, but nope, still a 240. I guess down here is for your PSU cables to hide. Clearance is a final round with GPU length up to 460mm. Even with the Bitspower 54mm thick Leviathan installed at the front with fans, I still had 385mm of GPU clearance. CPU cooler height is up to 150mm. For storage, there's 2 3.5-inch hard drive sleds around the back, which can also support 2.5-inch SSDs, as well as 2 dedicated SSD sleds around the back. Radiator support is pretty basic, and for the top you'll find support for a 360 radiator with a max clearance of 65mm. Fans can be installed on the outside of the chassis, but doing this will prohibit the internal chassis from sliding in or out. There's so much room up here to accommodate fans, I feel this is just poor planning. Fans can still go up here, they just need to be installed after. For the front, up to a 240mm radiator is supported with basically unlimited thickness. I really feel a 360 radiator mount should have been added here, as it clearly fits in. You just can't screw it down without a bit of modding. Yes, that was pretty brutal, but before we wrap up this review and go over all the mods I did on the case, let's check out the final build. Alrighty guys, now there's just a few other things I want to cover before going over to the additional work I did on this chassis. Now it does go on for a little bit, so I do apologize for that. Now, some other things I thought were strange was the vertical mount that does come pre-installed in the chassis, which is off to the side here, these two vertical slots. It does fit a 2-slot GPU. I found that it was pushed very, very far forward to the horizontal slots. Now these all did come with thumb screws pre-installed for each PCIe slot cover. Now if you saw the time-lapse build, I'll throw a bit up here, I had to remove every thumb screw and replace it with a standard screw. Now I could have just removed every cover, but I wanted to keep it clean and put them back, so I needed normal screws. Now thankfully enough screws were included, but with my GPU, which is the Bitspower block, it was too far pushing towards those horizontal covers, so it was fouling. So I could fit it in, but the video card was on a lean. Now I would say this backplate on this GPU block isn't overly thick, it's not sticking out a whole lot. So I do find that most GPUs, you'll have to swap all the screws with standard screws instead of thumb screws. Not a really big deal, but just something I found along the way. Now, I do find there is a lot of plastic on this chassis. You may not really know how much there is. I did cover some earlier. Both of the orange parts on each side, the left and the right, are that bright orange. You can see I've kind of painted, I didn't spend too much time painting the inside. You can see a little bit of orange there, but I painted each side of them black. Also the handle is all plastic. Now that marks very, very easy. And I did find that this fake sort of anodized orange on this plastic, it gets your fingerprints really bad, to an extent that just after finishing this review, I could not get my finger marks out of this orange, that used to be orange, that fake anodized plastic material. It kind of got to a stage where sort of the acid or the grease in my fingers was permanently staining them. So just keep that in mind. And I also found that a lot of other areas on the case were just marking quite a bit. You can see over here, there's quite a few dents here. Now this does get covered when you do put this large plate over. This is only when you're building it. I do find that there are parts always rubbing on this chassis, so just keep in mind with that. So these marks came out of the box like this, and there were some marks up there that came out of the box like that as well. Now, I haven't covered the I/O. You do get USB Type-C, which is good. I will give Cougar kudos for that. But the top area, I find is just really weird. It's just a whole mess. I'll throw a shot up. You got these random sort of covers that go up the top. You've got a middle one, you've got these plastic. Now these are all plastic, and the problem with going with plastic and then SE steel and so on is the mismatch of blacks. The plastic is much more sort of gray, and then you got the steel on the sides is more jet black, and I just find it looks really weird. Now you can remove a lot of this, but then you got some random frame bits up the top, and I just think that could have been done a bit better. And you may have noticed that earlier in the video I said you can't slide in the chassis like this once you pulled it out with the fans on the top. If you did watch the time-lapse video, I managed to slide the chassis back in. That's because I hacked a big bit out of the back. By hacking some out of the back, I was then able to have that little bit of extra room. If I take this back plastic bit out, I can then slide the chassis in, but by default, there is no way to slide in this external chassis if you do have the radiator mounted like this with the fans on the top. And you're probably gonna wanna do this because this is a 54mm thick radiator, and as you can see, there is no room to fit fans on the inside here. This motherboard, I can just fit my finger in the tops there. So you would clearly wanna put fans up here. There is just so much room up in this area. It'd just be a waste not to do so. Now the front fan at the very, very front, I just find that very, very strange. That glass is actually stuck in. I managed to prise it open, take it off, stick that screen in behind it, which everyone was asking about. I will mention the screen later on when I cover all the mods in this build. But yeah, throwing that fan at the front, it's just gonna be sucking against nothing because it was virtually pushed right against that, that glass panel. Now, one thing I did miss, I actually missed this completely in the whole review, is I must have removed it, or this little component at the very start, and I didn't see it until the end, that there is a dedicated pump bracket that slots in onto the side and then it screws onto the plastic PSU shroud down here. Now that is just a standard pump bracket. It's got a heap of holes, and then it can take like a DDC or a D5 or so on. And then those holes also line up with the holes at the back for mounting reservoirs and stuff. But I do find that kind of strange that it is screwing down onto the plastic PSU shroud. That's quite flimsy and so on. And also, if you do use that dedicated pump mount, you will find that you're very, very restricted to the radiator size you can install at the front, because there's only about 20 or so mils between that pump bracket to then the actual front of the case. For my build, I actually put my DDC at the very, very bottom under the PSU shroud, so you can't see it at all. Now, lastly, let's come to price. This comes in at 350 US dollars or 499 Australian dollars, which I think is kind of absurd for something like this. Now, for the previous Conquer, the original one, it was sort of around that price. It's a little bit less at the moment, but that case was all aluminum, and that was one of the first sort of trending cases like that style to sort of really take off. That was the first in its field, and a lot of other companies that have done similar designs. You've got Antec bringing out their Torque and so on. This to me just feels like it doesn't really sort of suit the Conquer name. Yes, it's got that similar shape, but that is about it. There is a heap of plastic, a heap of steel, a heap of random RGB, and very, very minimal aluminum. Now, I think if Cougar was to bring out something like the Antec Torque that has the USB Type-C, the 360 radiator support is all aluminum, sort of evolve on that design, I think that would have been more worthy of the Conquer 2 name, not something like this. If anything, this should have come out as a different series of case. To me, this whole pulling out this handle to get to your chassis, I don't really think it's needed. To me, like, I only think they've done it this way because it is so hard to work inside this case as it is at the moment. It doesn't have a big fat square window to work on to build in your components. You've had to physically remove it to get to your components, to install it all, and then to slide it back in. And just this outer shell just increases the size by that whopping amount, which isn't really needed. And that inner shell is just very, very flimsy. As you saw earlier, it's probably one of the flimsiest chassis I've checked out to date. But yeah, in saying that, that's my thoughts on this overall case. There's just, I think, just too much steel, too much random colors, too much RGB, and so on. Like, this footprint on the base is just huge, and the power supply, I think, only takes up half of it, and so on. But I'll just leave it up to you to what you think of this case. Now, in the time-lapse build, a lot of people were saying that it's not ugly. Yeah, I guess that comes down to taste. It might not be too ugly, but for me, if I was to spend $500 Australian on this chassis to get very, very minimum aluminum, you're getting lots of RGB. RGB might be your thing, but just the way the RGB is done, a lot of this case is over-engineered. There's just hundreds and hundreds of screws. Like, to get all this RGB off, I did do some modding. I'll cover that later on because there was just so much RGB. I tried to clean it up a bit. A lot of over-engineered parts, a lot of plastic behind that RGB you can't see, which I had to pull off to access that RGB as well. But I'll let you decide on what you think of this chassis. To me, I don't think it really does look that good. A lot of people are saying, well, they're thinking outside the box. It's better than something like a square chassis. Yes, I do agree on that, but a lot of square chassis, like especially say something like the 011 XL, it is square. People might think it's bland, but it is very functional. You can do a lot with those chassis. I don't think you can do too much with these chassis. Now, I don't mind the cases like the original Conquer and the Torque. They do look okay, but they do have the functionality to back them up, and they have the quality as well, being all aluminum and so on. This may have the looks for some, but I don't think it has the functionality and the quality. Like your other cases like the Lux 2, the 011 XL, which I mentioned, they are cheaper, quite a bit cheaper. You've got the INWIN 925, which I reviewed last week. That is a little bit more, but you're getting that gorgeous full aluminum shell on the outside. But I just feel there are a lot of other cases that are better in that price range. Now, moving on about the build. A lot of people saw the AQUA X570 AQUA. I did paint. Now, it wasn't the stock block that I got sent originally that has the GGF Events name tag at the bottom. I reached out to ASRock and they were able to send, I think it was a very, very early Computex model. The screws were different, and I do believe it was the one that was hanging up at the wall at Computex. It did say number 2 on the bottom here for the number branding. I did paint that. I went through a heap of paints again, like I do with a lot of my builds, trying to find the right color, and I went with a black chalkboard paint, and I think it came out pretty good because it's not jet black, it's more sort of a gray. And then I did put the vinyls back on, and a lot of people saw I put the 001 of 001 because I only feel that it pretty much is the only model in this color, so that's why I put the 01 down. Now the Trident Z Royale tops I also painted with the same black. Now they aren't the stock Royale tops, they are normal Trident Z RGB tops. I reached out to G-Skill quite a while ago, and they sent me just a heap of random tops that I could play around with. Now they do fit on, and I think it just gave it that different, unique look, and it tied it in all together with the build. Now moving on to the screen at the front, just like in the build last week, the NVIDIA 925, this is pretty much a standard 5.5 inch screen, although this one is from AliExpress instead of eBay. This one is sort of beefed up a little bit. It's 2560 by 1440. It is AMOLED and it is very, very thin. As you can see in the time-lapse build, I sort of showed a little bit on it. And what I did is I simply pulled that glass out, stuck it on the back. I sort of blacked out the borders with some vinyl, and then I just stuck it down, and then that just has a little daughter board via a ribbon cable, and then that just runs via HDMI straight into the back of the system, and it is USB powered as well, which is a nice touch. Now everyone was asking about the software used. That was just simply running a Rainmeter. Rainmeter has been around for as long as I can imagine, and I did run a custom skin. I have no idea what that custom skin was off the top of my head, but I will throw a link in the description for the Rainmeter and the custom skin, and then I just sort of moved it around a bit and played with it on the screen. Just something a little bit different than using my standard ADA 64 sensor panels that I normally do. Now some other things I did is I removed a heap of RGB. Now at the front it's got those 3 large thick white bars, light bars at the front. Now they are quite large, and the lights is sort of brought in through the bottom, and it comes out the sides and the top. So what I did is I taped the very tops of each one, and then I just painted all the sides. So that means that now when I have them on, the light only protrudes out of the top, and I think it keeps it much, much cleaner instead of just light everywhere. Because once you have this on in a dark room, it will light up the whole room. Now, another area I also did was, you see the very, very front Cougar little logo? That does come lit up with orange. I don't know why that isn't tied in with the rest of the RGB. It's only stock orange. I simply sanded that down, painted it the same chalkboard paint as the rest of the gear, and then just put a gold Cougar sticker on top, which I made up just to clean that up, because having that RGB and the rest all trying to make that RGB, as by default it's not RGB, and having the rest, I just thought it clashed because it was quite close together. Now I painted the PSU cover only because it kind of looks the same as how it came. It does come black, it still looks black, but that marked it very, very easily. Just reviewing this case, doing a build, removing in and out a few times, working on it. It does scuff up quite a bit, it is plastic. And in saying that, I don't think I've worked on a case in the last few years that have had a plastic PSU shroud. I'm not sure why they went down that route. I can only imagine because plastic will flex. You do need to try and bend it into place, but I think there could have been some better materials they could have used for that. Now in terms of the coolant, a lot of people are talking about the coolant, mustard coolant, orange coolant, yellow coolant. It is the gold VU from PrimoChill. Yes, this won't be being run for a long time. I know it doesn't last that long, so I will be pulling down the system very soon to remove that. When the system's off, as you see now, it kind of looks like yellow. It doesn't look that crash shot, but once it's on, you do get that beautiful view look where you get sort of the moving particles inside, and it does look more gold, which is a nice touch. And I wanted to see the contrast of having frosted tubing like this with a sort of clear reservoir like this. I must admit, the VU, you can't really see it through the frosted tubing. I was pretty sure you wouldn't have been able to, but then you do see it in the res, so it does sort of make for a pretty good contrast in the system if you are going down that route. Now I did make my own acrylic side panels. You might have been wondering in the time-lapse build, the very, very start, they were the very, very dark. I will say that they're very, very dark tempered glass. You really can't see much inside. There was one here and there's one here. So I simply grabbed some 4.5mm clear acrylic, traced around each one, although I did slightly alter them a bit. I made the top one a little bit higher, that went up here because the stock panel stops here. I thought, what the hell, I'll go up here, cover this area. I simply traced around most of it and then just guessed the rest of it. And then this bottom one is just a direct copy like this down here. Now I did remove one of the bars. There was a long bar that went all the way from, where was it, here to here, and I don't think that was needed with going with acrylic side panels. These two down the bottom here, actually, if I get it the right way, I think it went like that. These two screws down the bottom are enough to hold this like that. There was by default another bar that secures it in there. And I just think there's just too much going on in terms of bars and brackets and covers that you just can't see inside. I have taken a few off for the purpose of this video just to show you, because there was also this one which I did paint, which goes up like this, and then there's the big section that goes up over the top and covers it. Another bit, the riser cable. I can't seem to find a Cougar riser cable on their site anywhere, so I'm not sure what default riser cable you would use if you went with a vertical GPU like I've done here. I happen to have a Fantex riser cable on hand. The screw hole was a little bit off, so I just drilled my new hole that lined up. One hole lined up but one was off. So simply re-drilled that. It's not going through any traces or anything. It was right next to the other screw hole, so you should be fine with doing that. But I do sort of stress some caution. If you are using a different brand of PCIe riser cable, you may find out drilling through it, it may not work if you do so. But my holes were that close, I couldn't see any traces nearby, and it still works fine. And it actually did come out pretty good, and it is quite secure. As you saw in the video, the PSU shroud or this cover is very flimsy, but once your power supply goes in, that rubber pad sits on your power supply, and it does make for a very, very strong vertical GPU mount, which is good to see. As I mentioned earlier, I did hack the top off to allow the fans to slide in on top, which I think they should have really done that. As you can see, I just used a jigsaw or a Dremel. I'm pretty sure I used a jigsaw because I'm sick of going through little Dremel bits all the time. I just used a jigsaw and put 2 angle bits on, and then it can slide in. Like, that could have been done by default. It hasn't really lost any rigidity. Once you screw this other bit back in, it is fine. And that just allows me to slide this out without having to worry about trying to install these fans on later. But yeah, that's pretty much it on this build. Quite a long one. Hope you enjoyed everything I did to this. Might give you some ideas, but yeah, in saying that, I really don't think this should follow the Conquer name, especially being Conquer 2. I really think the guys should go back to the drawing board and sort of elaborate or build on the original one. Bring it out as all aluminum, have 2 360mm radiator support, have USB Type-C, maybe make it a little bit bigger than the original one, and go from there. I think this is just too far out there, too crazy. The looks might appeal to some, but I just think the functionality and the quality of materials just aren't quite there. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I want to thank you guys for watching, and thank you for Cougar for sending this out, and stay tuned for the next video.